let me read a portion from the appendix of the reference edition to kind of explain what's going on here. To avoid overstepping the bounds of a translator into the field of exegesis, and that's basically interpreting what the authors intended, we have been most cautious about rendering the divine name in the Christian Greek scriptures, always carefully considering the Hebrew scriptures as a background. And we have looked for agreement from the Hebrew versions to confirm our rendering. And that's talking about those Hebrew translations of the Greek scriptures. Thus, out of the 237 times that we have rendered the divine name in the body of our translation, there's only one instance where we have no agreement from the Hebrew versions. But in this one instance, namely 1 Corinthians 7:17, the context and related texts strongly support the rendering of the divine name. So what they do here is they try to establish their standard, and they seek to be careful, they seek to be consistent. I understand all that, and it's not necessarily my question in this video to determine whether they are consistent or not, and I hope maybe in a future video to challenge that. But my whole interest here is whether our Bible translations should have the divine name in the New Testament. And this seems to be what the Watchtower is suggesting, because whenever you read the portions in this publication and actually in this reference edition, anywhere where they talk about having the divine name in the New Testament, they talk about their justification, because when Jesus was quoting from the Hebrew Scriptures, did he misquote it? Did he neglect to use the divine name? And what about the rest of the New Testament authors? Did they neglect to use the divine name as well? And so there's that assumption that the New Testament authors would not have misquoted the Hebrew Scriptures. That's understandable. Okay, that's something I can, maybe discuss later on. But when they say things like that, it almost suggests that if you don't restore the divine name, then you're not getting the full gist of what the New Testament authors conveyed, because supposedly these corrupt scribes in the 2nd and 3rd century chose to start erasing the divine name and taking it out and replacing it with Lord. And so it would seem to me that if you're not inserting the divine name in the New Testament, then you're following the practice of corrupt scribes. Now, I'm not saying that the Watchtower claims that verbatim, but when you say things like rightfully restoring, it sounds to me like if you're not rightfully restoring, then maybe our New Testaments are neglecting something. But here's the thing, though. What would it look like? I want you to really think about this. What would it look like if all Bible translators chose to insert the divine name in the New Testament translations? Keep in mind, a lot of these Bible translators are Trinitarian. And if it's okay for the New World Translation to insert the divine name in places where there aren't even quotations from the Hebrew Scriptures, then what you're telling us is that we can use our theological careful discretion as to where we insert the divine name. So if the New World Translation can do that, why can't everyone else? But again, think about this. If Trinitarian Bible translators are allowed to use their careful theological discretion, I'm not talking about running wild with this, but being very careful in where we choose to insert the divine name, what do you think is going to happen? Where do you think we're going to insert the divine name? I'll let you answer that to yourself. But consider how discussions would happen in the future with Jehovah's Witnesses and Trinitarians when, we're trying to really have some conversations, about issues pertaining to the deity of Christ and things like that. Think about how that would cloud the conversation if all of our Bibles, use the divine name in the New Testament. Obviously, everyone's going to come to some pretty different conclusions as to where that should be. And so this is where the main problem lies, and why I just don't think this is a good idea that we should be, quote-unquote, restoring the divine name in the New Testament. Because think about how the conversations are hindered as it is, because none of our Bibles, not my Bible, has the divine name in the New Testament, and it becomes really difficult when discussing these important issues with Jehovah's Witnesses, because they're reading their Bibles that have the divine name. And so when we're talking about, is Jesus Jehovah, it's easy for a Jehovah's Witness to look at his Bible and say, well no, this word Jehovah is not applied to Jesus in any places in the New Testament. And I know we can go to the Greek and things like that, but I'm just saying that it really hinders the conversation, especially those who are not familiar with the Greek, not familiar with textual criticism, and how the divine name isn't in any of these manuscripts that we possess. And so what I'm really calling for is just consistent standards. If you're going to say that we can start inserting the divine name in the New Testament, then it's going to be very problematic. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't say, we can only have the divine name in our Bible, but you can't have it in your Bible in the New Testament. So I see a whole lot of problems with this, and I hope in some future videos to really discuss this important issue in depth, and why I think that the New Testament writers did not use the divine name in their inspired writings. So I hope this has given you some things to chew on and think about, and hopefully in the future we can have some intelligent interactions about this issue, and not only whether the divine name should be in our translations, but whether it was there at all. Thanks for watching. God bless.